breaking news.
Just kidding. You probably already know this happened.
So Donald Trump was elected to be president of the United States of America, but you should already know that.
Well, apparently a lot of people didn't. Search interest for did Joe Biden drop out is spiking on election day, even though he withdrew a few months ago at this point.
How nice would it be to be living in such a blissful state of ignorance that you didn't know that until election day? But anyway, they must not have a hard time sleeping at night.
Welcome to our latest episode where we dive into a topic that has been on probably everyone's mind, at least for the last few days. What does a Trump presidency mean for Canadians as the political landscape south of the border takes a dramatic shift? We are here to unpack the potential ripple effects that could reach here on our Canadian shores.
From trade relations to immigration policies, from energy deals to economic impacts, I would say the implications of a Trump administration could be far-reaching for Canada. Whether you are a policy wonk, a concerned citizen, or just curious about what the future might hold, this episode promises to deliver insights that matter to you.
We'll be cutting through all of the noise, setting aside politics and partisan rhetoric, and focusing on the real-world consequences that Canadians might face, with, of course, a special focus on real estate. So buckle up as we embark on this journey to understand the complex interplay between American politics and Canadian life. Get ready for an eye-opening discussion that will leave you better informed and prepared for what may lie ahead. And make sure you stick around for the number 10, because we're going to be talking about the biggest real estate investment opportunities that could come from this.
So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover tariffs and the trade war, Keystone XL, which is already being discussed again, the U.S. seeing record Google searches for move to Canada. We'll talk about potential migrations, including deportation promises, asylum, Roxham Road, changing culture around migration in the Western world, changing culture around government spending, potential reduction, efficiency, and austerity. We're going to talk about global markets being bullish on the USA and the USD, which kind of means everybody else is seeing reduced demand for bonds and currency. Stocks and crypto started ripping. Canada's bond yield curve jumped up, and the Canadian dollar is at a one-year low. There's likely more stimulus on the way for those markets. China will probably have to amp up their stimulus and kind of global performance a lot. Mostly bad things, I would say, but in the fullness of time, as their biggest trading partner, if the U.S. is succeeding and recovering, maybe we will see the same. And then the final one is, will the U.S. demand more military spending from Canada? We already know that this was promised by Trudeau to Biden, but is that an opportunity for the military cities in Canada?
Yeah, love that. So let's start with trade relations here, Dan. I'm going to read a couple of headlines that just hit. This first one is from The Star, and it reads, Trump says the U.S. has been screwed by Canada, so brace yourselves for a full-on trade war. That does not sound too fun. Bloomberg commented on the trade relations as well. Former U.S. ambassador questions Canada-U.S. trade relations after election. Global, Trump's America First agenda, a threat to Canadian-U.S. trade. That's from Albertan business leaders. And then, of course, CBC jumped in and got into the mix. Canadian trade survived the first Trump presidency. Here's how it can survive the second, as industries in Canada know Trump is threatening tariffs, but this time they have a plan. So Trump says that the U.S. has been screwed by Canada. Brace yourselves for a full-on trade war. You know, that could be pretty nerve-wracking for some people, right? I mean, the States is quite literally 10 times the size as we are. We don't want to mess with Big Brother. Now, some key points from this article, Dan, from The Star, is that Trump's re-election as U.S. president raises concerns of that possible impending trade war with Canada. He does plan to impose 10 to 20% tariffs on U.S. imports, potentially damaging the $900 billion trade relationship between our two countries. Canada may also face pressures to make concessions in areas like the dairy market access and digital services taxations, while also being expected to increase military spending and critical mineral production. And alas, Canada is growing accustomed to being bullied by large, powerful nations such as China, India, and I guess soon again, the United States.
That's that's an exact quote from the article, which I just thought was really funny. Anyway, I think
bullying's not good. Not on the playground, not on the world stage. Just stop it.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess Trump's like a kind of a leading cyber bully with his Twitter antics. So, the exposure here is important from my perspective. Another important part of the article says that in recent report from Trevor Tombe, who's consulted, he's one of my favorite economists on Twitter, actually, but on U.S. Canada trade relations, he found that half of all two-way merchandise trade between the two countries consists of businesses exporting to related companies in the other country. Let's hop to the next article here, which is from BNN Bloomberg, that says former U.S. ambassador questions Canada-U.S. trade relations after the election. So, I mean, I think from my perspective, this one just really strengthens the resolve that there's some fear that, that Trump's tariffs and stuff like that could be net negative probably in the fullness of time in the immediate for Canada. But I think in the long term, probably not so bad. And there's some discussion about Keystone XL, which we're going to get to. So it could be, maybe a shift for Canada, who's obviously a resource producing country and has a pretty strong oil sector, could be bullish in that regard. But that's a much longer term outlook, right?
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff is longer term outlook. Dan, we usually say not financial advice. I guess we should say none of this is financial advice, nor does this reflect any of our personal political views, which are going to remain out of this episode. Just as always, we are trying to bring and decipher as much of this information as possible. Anyways, the next piece here, Trump's America First agenda poses a threat to the Canada-U.S. trade, and that is from Albertan business leaders. Dan, you were just talking about oil. Obviously, a lot of the oil here in Canada comes from the province of Alberta. So some key points from this article from Global News. Donald Trump's re-election raises concerns about potential negative impacts on Alberta's trade with its biggest trading partner, the United States. And Trump's America First agenda really emphasizes economic protectionism and tariffs that could significantly affect Canadian exports, particularly in sectors like energy, agriculture, and critical minerals. So basically, a lot of the prairie provinces, basically all the way over to Ontario, where mining and potash and wheat and dairy and oil make up a lot of our GDP and business and exports. That could be a pretty bad thing if these tariffs come into play. And Alberta business leaders did comment on this, calling for a unified, quote unquote, Team Canada approach to navigate these challenges that are potentially posed by Trump's policies and to protect the $156 billion worth of exports to the United States. Yeah.
It's funny, like everybody shipping the tweets out the day after the election, like they seem very I don't know, butt kissy, I suppose. Just so many of the congratulatory tweets. I guess it's good sportsmanship. Okay, next article says Canadian trade survived the first Trump presidency. Here's how it could survive the second. Industries in Canada know that Trump is threatening tariffs, but this time they have a plan. Obviously, they survived last time. But they're preparing for obviously potential trade disruptions as the U.S. presidential election when it happened, with fears of tariffs and trade barriers resurfacing a little bit. They have experience because they've been through this before. Industry leaders emphasizing the importance of highlighting interconnectedness. And the best quote I could find from that article was, "We managed to show them that their interests were better served with us than any other partner that they have." And that's from Flavio Volpe, president of the Canada's Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. So it could obviously significantly affect, based on these articles, Canada-U.S. trade relations, potential renegotiation or withdrawal from like the USMCA. That's what Trump did during NAFTA, I think in 2017. They exited. Increased tariffs, particularly in sectors like steel, lumber, and automotive, and possible trade disputes that could create some economic uncertainty for Canada. Let's hop over to energy and the environment here, Nick, because I think this one's obviously a little bit more positive.
Yeah, let's hope so. Trump's energy policies could also have a impact on Canada. One of them is a potential revival of the Keystone XL pipeline project. On his fourth day in office, Trump signed an executive order to allow the Keystone XL pipeline to move forward. That was several years ago on March 28th of 2017. Now, divergence in climate change policies and environmental regulations, Trump is going to ramp up U.S. oil and energy production, while at the same time, we are scaling ours back. So the oil and gas emissions cap might be Trudeau's last chance. That's from the National Observer.
Yeah, I think that one's kind of an interesting article. Some key points there: the federal government's emissions cap on oil and gas producers sort of formalized promises made by companies. This is a new thing, obviously, and address the rising emissions despite previous commitments. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith opposed the cap and advocates for increased oil and gas production, ignoring global trends towards decarbonization. The article suggests that the Trudeau government should focus on the issue, potentially replacing the carbon tax with industry-focused measures to clarify the stakes for voters in the next election.
Yeah, and the kind of overall industry response has been a bit of an interesting, bit of a funny one. From Reuters reads, some Canadian oil firms simply await Trudeau's fate rather than cut emissions faster. So
yeah, I thought that was pretty funny, actually.
Yeah. Playing hardball, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I guess when we just jump quickly to the next one, immigration. Trump's stance on immigration obviously is pretty clear, but it could have some effects for Canada. A potential increase in immigration to Canada from the U.S. and other countries in a handful of different ways that we're going to discuss. Possible strain on the Canadian immigration system and resources, especially from like illegal migration, people claiming asylum or refugee status, kind of resurrection of the Roxham Road issue, which we're going to dive into a little bit. More likely now than ever, we won't actually see the government capable of reaching their population growth reduction targets from my perspective.
Yeah. Now, Dan, this next piece here, this is one of those things that you can very easily get in trouble for talking about. And we don't like to get in trouble on the show, do we? We save our trouble for when we're not speaking to our thousands of amazing listeners across the country. So instead of using our own words here, we are going to read some headlines again. This one is from the Globe and Mail. Reads, Canada is preparing for an influx of U.S. migrants facing deportation after Trump's victory. And CBC said that months after closure of Quebec's Roxham Road, more asylum seekers are actually arriving by air. And Global went on to say that there's huge implications for possible BC immigration impacts. And City News went on to say that Canada is now bracing for the impact of U.S. election on immigration. So this seems to be, whether it's me reading the headlines or the people writing these, this seems to be kind of a general concern in the mainstream media here in Canada.
Yeah, it's definitely been acknowledged as a key factor. So I'm going to quickly just dive right into these articles. So the first article is, Canada is preparing for an influx of U.S. migrants facing deportation after Trump's victory. Key points from this article is the potential impact. Obviously, RCMP in Quebec is already prepared contingency plans for possible influx of migrants from the U.S. The Quebec Premier Legault warns of turbulence at the border, citing integration capacity concerns, and the and Bloc Québécois leader Blanchette raised concerns about Canada's preparedness for potential mass migration. So give me some context on kind of like the size and scale of this deportation that Trump has pledged in the U.S., Nick.
Yeah, well, it's no small feat here. He has pledged the largest deportation in U.S. history, which is kind of mind-boggling when you think about it, targeting an estimated 11 million undocumented migrants. 11 million. Again, largest deportation in U.S. history. We'll see how this all plays out. Again, this is all emerging stories. These are all, again, kind of breaking news articles, a lot of speculation here. However, the Canadian government, upon seeing and hearing some of that rhetoric, has assured us it will maintain control of our borders and immigration.
Yeah, I think, I think it was JD Vance who had said that they were capable of kind of executing on that plan at per the tune of like 1 million deportations per year. So the question becomes like, what percentage of that is people who end up fleeing to Canada when they're chosen to leave, if they want to kind of like maintain the position that they have in the Western world. Deputy Prime Minister Freeland reassured government control over the borders. It's crazy that we're even having these conversations, like just to hear that you're hearing politicians already being involved in this as if it's like this is something that is going to happen. So they increased surveillance, additional police from other provinces, and this is at the Quebec border crossing. And the scenarios ranging from new families to hundreds daily. If you want some historical context, like this has happened in 2017 after Trump was elected last time, there was an influx of Haitian migrants at Roxham Road. The government agencies prepared to respond and adapt in that way. And there was an immigration lawyer cited in the article who said that he's already seeing a huge potential of mass arrivals with asylum claims from the U.S. are rarely approved, but they may provide a temporary stay. And you mentioned another article, which was the closure of Quebec's Roxham Road, but then asylum seekers basically just started arriving by air rather than. So Roxham Road is this like road that goes from New York State to Quebec, and a lot of people were using it to get into Quebec, and it had like this whole system built. We'll get into it actually. So give me the subheading here and some of the other details, just to give people like, I think this is important context because a lot of people talk about migration, population growth as if it's such a substantial piece of Canada's real estate, and I don't disagree, to be honest. So I think we should really chat on it.
Yeah, no, agreed. Okay, so this next subheading here says more than 4,000 asylum claims processed at Canadian airports in June alone, and that is up from 1,300 back in January. So some key points from this article on asylum seekers are that asylum claims did drop in March 2023 with the deal of the U.S., but they are on the rise again. And that deal that I just mentioned was the closure of Roxham Road, which Dan just explained. Then in June 2023, that number was back up to 4,350 claims that was processed at airports, so not ground transportation anymore. And those were mostly processed in the provinces of Quebec and Ontario. A safe third country agreement now applies to the entire Canada-US border, with refugee support organizations in Montreal reporting high demand for these services. And we actually saw this, Dan, in one of our favorite markets, Cornwall, which is right on the border, very close. It's in Ontario, very close to Quebec, right on the U.S. border. There's actually a bridge that goes right from Ontario, right out of Cornwall, right into the United States. And just because Quebec takes any English-speaking migrants to Ontario, they might end up there first. So this increase is attributed to, again, global displacement crisis with, unfortunately, this is another really sad but kind of crazy statistic, 110 million people displaced worldwide.
Yeah, so I mean, Trump's decision in 2017 reduced the number of refugees the U.S. would accept from 110,000 to 50,000, and obviously would have a major impact on the increase of irregular migrants entering Canada. Irregular meaning that they bypassed official ports of entry. This prompted many to try their luck in Canada. Obviously, there were 2,400 irregular entries apprehended by the RCMP in Quebec, Manitoba, and BC in all of 2016. By the end of 2017, that number climbed to 20,000. Right, so a
Wow.
10x, almost a 10x increase as a result of the policy, or sorry, the election of Trump from 2016 to 2017 last time. So you could imagine if the outcome is the same today.
Yeah. So again, going back to 2017, Quebec saw 18,836 people cross through Roxham Road. And Roxham Road was, again, that kind of loophole in that safe third country agreement, which requires asylum seekers to claim protection in the first safe country, which in this case would be Canada. 95,610 irregular asylum seekers used Roxham Road before its closure back in March of 2023. And the road transformed from rural to processing compound for asylum seekers. It really changed the landscape over there.
Yeah, apparently there was like a whole like tent cities and a bunch of stuff like that. So, and also I think that number obviously is going to end up being misstated. You would likely have like that's 95,000 that they know about, right? So
I'd assume, yeah, many more than that likely.